All right, thanks so much for watching my channel. Somebody requested that I make a tutorial on Mission Impossible, and I thought about it, and I thought that, okay, I'll give it a try here. And so what I'm going to talk about is how to improvise on this. I probably expect that you maybe don't need my help to play the melody, to play the notes, but maybe you could use some guidance on how to improvise, not just on this song, but let's say there's a lot of songs, especially like kind of popular music, where you do sort of a groove in your left hand. You're playing a bass line or some kind of set groove, an ostinato, if you will, in your left hand that keeps repeating. And then in your right hand, you improvise with it. Okay? That's something that I love to do. It's like, I almost feel like it's my specialty, is to have a groove in the left hand and then just go off in the right hand and like improvise and try a bunch of different stuff. It's just fun. I love to groove like that. So I'm just going to talk about, well, one, I want to tell you what kind of scales that I use on this, and then two, I want to show you how you can get better at doing that. And it's really more of a rhythmical practice than anything else. So first off, let's just talk about the scales. So the groove that I'm talking about is basically this, the bass line. So you have that, and then on top of that, you're going to be improvising. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, is how you can improvise like that. The first thing let's talk about is what scales that we can use. So basically, you probably figure this out. It's a G minor. The key is a G minor here, right? So we could go with the very obvious approach, the obvious scale, which would be a G natural minor, Aeolian, if we're going to talk about the mode. So that would sound very kind of classical sounding almost. To me, the scale has a classical vibe to it. All right, you get the idea. That is this guy almost, it feels almost like some kind of classical sound to me. It's okay. But another one we could try is over here. It's called a harmonic minor. So we raise the seventh up a half step and we get this. Also kind of classically, kind of almost like a Halloween vibe, right? All right. Yeah, it works too. That's cool. All right, so let's move on though. This next one, the Dorian, I used this one quite a bit in my solo on the arrangement. The Dorian is basically, you got a natural minor with the sharp six, okay? You want to remember those key characteristics of the scale. So, instead of that. All right, now this is starting to give it a little more of a jazz flavor. The Dorian definitely has more of this kind of cool jazz sound to it than an Aeolian one. So let's hear how that sounds. I like that sound. I think it's fun. It's cool to play on. I use it a lot. And then one other scale that I use quite a bit on this song is the melodic minor scale, which is the raised 6th and 7th. So like that. And this one sounds like this. That was another fun scale to play on. I like playing on this melodic minor scale a lot as well. And I'm kind of switching back and forth between that Dorian, the melodic minor. I didn't put it in here, but you could even get away with playing just a straight up blues scale on this. If you're not familiar, you could play that as well. Gives it, definitely more of a bluesy bluesy feel to it with the blues scale, of course. So you could use that. I don't use that particular scale like that so much, but I end up using the flat fifth in any of these other scales that we talked about. So especially when we have a song like this that's like, it's one chord, we call this like a modal. It's a modal improvisation where we just pick one chord and we just play on that just the whole time. All right, there's a lot of famous modal songs like So What, something like that, Impressions, or some other ones. But and a lot of kind of pop music tends to be modal like this. A lot of it can be like this. So when you do that, you have to really kind of create some variation. If you just keep playing the same scale over and over, it's going to get a little bit boring. All right, so one tone that you can just kind of input into any of these scales, you can input extra tones into it. It turns it into what we call a bebop scale, where you have your normal scale, but then we add extra note. It could be one extra note, it could be two extra notes. For instance, on a minor scale, you can use this for any song, not just this song, but you have a minor scale. Let's take Dorian, for example. A cool note that we could add to that scale would be the flat fifth. The flat fifth on a minor chord is the blues sound. That's the sound that makes it bluesy, right? The blue tone. So now instead of just a straight 7-note scale like we had, I've all of a sudden turned this into an 8-note scale. Kind of messes up all the fingering that you might have practiced for it. And we might not play it exactly like that as a scale, but if you get that extra note in there, then it's going to give you a lot more interesting melodic opportunities to come up with some cool stuff. So I'll give you an example. You can see, maybe you can see how I was kind of inputting that note into that scale, even though I was still centered on the Dorian mode. So you can use that with any mode, not just minor scales. You can add extra tones. That's one of the obvious tones that you can add on a minor. Another one being the sharp 7, if you're playing, let's say, Dorian or in Aeolian for that matter. You can add that note as well to the scale. It's in the other one, so it wouldn't be considered adding if you added it to the melodic minor or the harmonic minor, but for the other ones, you could add it as an extra tone. Say, for instance, on Dorian, add that one. So it's giving this this little extra note that goes in there that kind of switches it up. It switches up the sound, gives you more opportunities to create cool melodies and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely experiment with that. Those are the obvious ones, but that doesn't mean that we can't use those other tones, okay? So for instance, there's a couple other tones if we're sticking with the Dorian for that matter. Well, of course, the flat 13 or the sharp 5. Well, we just add that note and don't play the E, then we're just back to an Aeolian scale, but we can use both, and it has a kind of a cool flavor to it. All right, then we also have the flat 9. It's got a kind of a dissonant tone, but we can definitely make it work. If we just like play flat 9, it's gonna be like, oh, that sounds like a wrong note. Like for instance. It's pretty spicy tone there, but yeah, you can make it work. Maybe you want to create this kind of. Sometimes I want to create this like this is really in your face kind of sound. And if you throw in a note like that, that's totally outside the scale. It just kind of gives it this bite. So maybe you can work with that. You could also just use it more, kind of going quickly on a scale. Then you won't notice the tension nearly as much. So yeah, you don't even notice this. I don't think if you listen to that, you would go, oh, that sounds so weird. It's fine. No, because you figured out how to use it in a way that doesn't stick out. You're not ending the phrase on it. If you end a phrase on a tone like that, it's definitely going to sound odd. Like for instance, if I ended a phrase on the flat 9, I kind of like that phrase. I thought it was going to sound weirder than it did, but I kind of dig it actually. So anyway, you can use that tone. The other one, the only other tone is the B natural. Now you add the major third to a minor third. Now that's about as much tension as you can get. You can get real dissonant with that sound. Doesn't mean you can't use it. If you want to create some serious dissonance with this song, I don't go that far too often, but you never know. You might be in the mood for something like really just out there. But you can, of course, incorporate that as quickly. Alright, it's a bit tricky to use that note. I don't use it all that often, but I will use it if I'm doing some sort of chromatic playing. So the chromatic playing is almost like you just forget that you're playing the Dorian scale and you just start playing notes. You just start playing all the notes and you create some melodies that are really angular or whatever they might be, but moving around and using all the tones, and it sounds something like this. Part of my phrase, I was doing kind of like these just very angular melodic type shapes and stuff, and then I got into some more chromatic patterns, and chromatic patterns can be really cool. They're not really all that hard to do. Like for instance, you could just play a chromatic scale, of course. Right, well, if you do that, it's going to sound like you're at a circus. Maybe for like a few seconds it's cool, but more than that, it's going to turn into circus music. So I wouldn't do too much of that. But let's say like you take a simple little melodic motif, a little motif, and you're going to create these sort of chromatic patterns based off that. Let's just say ba ba bum, ba ba dum. Okay, we'll use that, and now I go. So you get the idea that you can create these cool little patterns. You can do it with triads as well. I like to do that too. Like let's say for instance, and when I do this kind of triadic stuff, I almost never use a root position triad to do it. It's usually a second inversion, maybe sometimes a first inversion. For whatever reason, using a root position triad on this kind of chromatic stuff, it just kind of, I don't know, it just doesn't sound as cool as a second inversion. It kind of sticks out nice. So there, I'm just kind of moving down in this, mixing it up. If you do it too obviously, like if everything is the same pattern, all right, now it just sounds like a hand-in exercise on crack or something. It's not gonna fly. All right, so you got to find creative ways to use it. You can, of course, practice it like that. And I recommend to practice it like that, where you take one pattern and you just keep going up and up and up and down and down and down until you get really smooth at it. But then you got to take it to the next level, and you got to find a way to make it interesting. You can't just do pattern. It's going to get really boring, and it's just going to sound like an exercise. We don't want that. All right, so now talking about, I think the really difficult part of this one is it's not so hard because we only have one chord. That makes it easy. The difficult part is that we're in 5/4 time signature. We're all used to playing more in 4/4 and 3/4, most of us anyway. 5/4 time signature, and we have this consistent ostinato bass line that just keeps going on, right? So what the key is that we got to keep this bass line. We want to keep that groove happening in our left hand, but then we want to be able to improvise freely with our right hand to be able to go off and do different things and not be restricted by the rhythm that we're playing with the left hand. All right, that's easier said than done. That's a really complicated, difficult thing that you got to work on, and it's not easy. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's not easy. I worked pretty hard, and I practiced a lot, and I got a lot of the ideas of how to practice this from my drummer friends, because drummers they're doing all kinds of cool stuff at the same time. They got both hands, they got both feet moving, and they're playing in different things. They have this one ostinato happening here, or they have this thing happening here. All right, so it's almost like you're practicing as if you're a drummer. Because piano can be a string instrument, but it can also be a percussive instrument. So we're going to work on it this time as a percussive instrument, and we're going to practice like we would as a drummer. So slow the tempo down at first and do it slower. It doesn't have to be at the full tempo. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of how I practice this. At some point, I'll get deeper into it. And in fact, I intend to make sort of a training workshop where you can really practice with me and really improve. But we're just going to touch base on this right now. So, if you got this bass line, you're consistently playing, right? We'll start off with one simple pattern. All right, the simple pattern, very simple, is we're going to do a dotted half note and then a half note. So 3 beats and 2 beats. And you can use whatever notes you want, but stick to the same rhythm pattern. Okay, we're working on this one rhythm pattern, and that's how you have to do it. You have to take one rhythm pattern at a time, add another rhythm pattern, add another rhythm pattern, and keep going, and you've built up 20, 30, 40, 50, and each one should get a little easier than the last one. And after you've worked on a bunch of patterns, you've worked them all out, then you'll have a whole lot of vocabulary to work with that you can start to create some phrases. Okay, so, well, here's what I mean. So, that's really easy for you, and if so, then go on to the next one. Maybe it's a challenge, you got to work on that till you get it smoothly. Well, work on that until you can do. If you can't do that smoothly, then you're going to have no prayer of being able to improvise on this. All right, so you got to take it one step at a time. Okay, so the next one is to do the same rhythm as the bass line. This is relatively easy to feel because both hands are playing the same rhythm, but being able to change the notes while keeping that rhythm, something like so like I said before, we're practicing the rhythm of it. You would never play like that because it's a continuous line. It's not really musical in that sense, but it's musical in the fact that we're keeping this groove. We're keeping the rhythm going, okay? So you got that. Now, make it a little bit more expansive and sort of a variation on the bass line. So, ba-da-da-da, how about ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba. It's starting to sound a little bit like music's starting to happen. It was still, again, because I'm playing the same thing over and over. It's not that musical sounding, but then you could try to do maybe just a straight eighth note up to the first part. How about that? So you got that. Now you can try maybe doing a complete all eighth notes, just playing all up and down, playing eighth notes. Rhythmically speaking, that's not all that hard. Now, actually, it's more difficult if I do all quarter notes. Quarter notes, straight quarter notes, a little bit tricky to feel. It sounds like this. Okay, now, for the first time, the right hand is really kind of, I wouldn't say fighting, but it's really kind of has a different rhythmical feel than the left hand now. Up till now, they've all been sort of related, so they've been somewhat easy to feel. Now it's starting to get into where your right hand and left hand are doing different things. All right, that's probably, I imagine if you haven't done this a lot, that's probably just what I just did is probably a bit tricky to do. But spend some time with it. And again, if you can't just play quarter notes, how are you going to play something really hip and cool if you can't even just play a straight quarter note without losing the time, without losing the groove, okay? So don't get ahead of yourself. Don't try to play the craziest stuff right off the bat when you can't even do the basics. Like, get those basics down, and then you can really start to expand upon it a little bit at a time and take one thing and learn it, go to the next one, learn it, go to the next one, and learn it, and just keep adding to it. And yeah, you do that for a while, you learn a bunch of these, you just make up your own rhythms. You can make up 1-bar phrases as first, and then as you get a little bit better, try to create a 2-bar phrase that you repeat every 2 bars. Experiment with it. So anyway, that's the basics way that I practice this kind of song. This song and other songs like it, where you're doing this ostinato and you're just kind of grooving along. So I hope that helps, and yeah, have fun with it. Play with the metronome, play with some kind of groove so that you're feeling the groove and you know that you're staying on 5/4 and not switching to 4/4. Okay, because if you practice without anything, you might not know that you're mixing it up. So I definitely recommend to practice with a metronome in 5 or some kind of rhythm groove in 5. So, all right, thanks so much for watching, and yeah, and I'll come out with some new stuff. Let me know what you think, and let me know if you got some suggestions about other tutorials, things you want to know. Write me some questions, I'm happy to answer them. So, and see you next time. Thanks.